Hello, my name is Nikki Lowther, and I am going to present my instructional design project. I have been a teacher in Columbus City Schools for 17 years, and I have taught kindergarten through second grade. Mostly, I have taught first grade. This is my first year at Mays Elementary. I teach all subject areas in first grade. So as we were doing remote learning, I had seen that when I was doing story problem or word problem of the day on Zoom, a lot of my students were confused. They didn't know whether to add or subtract. They didn't know anything about what an equation was, the equal sign they got confused with. So the standard that I was working on was using addition and subtraction within 20 to solve word problems. So some of the things that I saw on Zoom and what they were saying is, I'm not sure if I should add or subtract. Do I use a plus or minus sign? And then what does it mean when it says how many more or in all together? Do I add? Do I subtract? So I was taking, observational and notes and writing those down. So the learner traits that influenced my decision was during August through February on remote learning. I saw that they didn't have any strategies to solve word problems. Again, didn't know what an equation was. They didn't know what numbers they should pick and then what order. So all students needed interventions is what I saw on my Zoom. Target learners, I did choose cohort A with 8 students. I had 4 girls and 4 boys. Out of those 8, 2 were beginning ESL students with limited English. So using the vocabulary that I did for math, a lot of it was, they didn't really understand it. I had 1 intermediate ESL student, 1 advanced ESL student, and 2 students that had an absentee problem when we were on Zoom. When we did come back into the class, into the school, one of those students had a hard time ever showing up. I may have seen her about 5 days from February until the end of May here. The other student in school was great for showing up. The Zoom still was lacking. Once we did go into school, based off of my observations while working with word problems, I would do thumbs up and thumbs down questioning. I had sign-ins or exit tickets that the students had to do, and I created Kahoot games where they were on their Chromebooks and I would display the questions I created on my smartboard. From this information that I gathered, I was able to form guided math groups. And within these math groups, I was able to differentiate my instruction based on the students' needs. So each time the students were in the class, Monday and Tuesday, I met with each group approximately 15 to 20 minutes. And, here is just an example of one of my sign-ins, and you can see that it is an addition in all within 20, and all the 7 students that were there that day wrote the equation the correct way and solved the problem correctly. Here is another sign-in, and this one was a little bit more difficult. It was talking about how many more girls are there in the class than there are boys. And this is just year after year a problem that they don't quite understand. You can see 3 of the students got this correct and 4 students did not. They chose to do 4 plus 5 equals 9. So they're saying that there's 9 more girls in the class. So I knew that was a, intervention that I had to provide of the missing add-in. Here is just an example of a Kahoot question that I created. They had to pick a plus or minus sign. They, I got information here with the graph of 6 students got it right, 1 did not. Students were not able to see who was correct or not. That was just for me. And they were able to see personally if they got it correct, but they loved that game. Here's just an example of one of my guided math groups. So this little girl was doing an addition word problem and she's counting on. So that was her strategy that she picked.
8, 9,
So here she was counting on, she had to write her equation and the sum. Here is another math group, and this was just, he was choosing, do his work on a sticky note here, and I think he was drawing a picture. Here was that Ohio Learning Standard that I talked about, adding some and subtracting within 20 for solving word problems. And then the ITS standard is the empowered learner. And I wanted them to take an active role in demonstrating of what they understood. So I created a seesaw that they could choose strategies of how they wanted to solve it and explain their answers. And then at Maze, we are using I am learning goals, and it was just I am learning to add and subtract within 20 by using one or more strategies to show my understanding. So these are more for the kids, to know what they are working on. Here's my data source number 1 for observational data on Zoom from August to February. Here, 2 students didn't show up for Zoom most of the time, and when they were present, they did not understand the concept of writing equations, solving it, adding a subtraction. 5 students showed little understanding on writing equations or selecting the correct sign consistently and identifying keywords within the word problem to help determine if they needed to add or subtract. And 1 student did show understanding using numbers 1 through 10, but struggled with missing add-in in the word problems. So when we did come to school in February, so this is February to May, here's the sign-ins. And so from my sign-ins, I knew addition word problems, writing equations and solving them correctly. Most of the students is 86% or around there. They were correct. The only thing, the major issue was just miscounting. If they had a number line, they were more to be correct. The subtraction word problems, if we had missing add-in, 14 to 0% correct most of the time. Writing an equation and solving it. Here, by the data that I collect, I form my math groups for guided math groups. And this is about, I had 3 groups. I had group 1. They were doing basic subtraction within 10, and then we would continue on into 20 if they needed it. Group 2, basic subtraction within 20, and group 3, missing or basic subtraction with missing add-ins. Here's just a picture of a guided math group, and they're focusing on subtraction within 20. Here they were circling important numbers and words within the equation. They wrote their equation 2 different ways because 1, they did teddy bear counters, and then they solved it another way by using a number line. Here are my outcomes. They did do a seesaw activity, and I did do differentiation by picking a problem that they would be successful at, but yet challenging. Students 1 and 2, they did subtraction within 20. And they wrote the equation the right way, and they both used a number line for their strategy. Student 3 and student 4, they did subtraction, missing add-in within 20. They did write the correct equation. Student 3 counted backwards. Student 4 counted backwards, did it incorrectly. And the biggest problem was when they're counting backwards from like 15, 14, 12, sometimes they would miss that 13. It wasn't a big red flag, but it's something that we need to work on a little bit more. Student 5, subtraction missing add-in within 20. They chose a number line and wrote the equation the correct way. Student 6, I wasn't able to get any data from her. And student 7 and 8, both subtraction within 20. And they were correct on their equation, and they chose to draw a picture. Again, my outcomes, I was very pleased with the progress that my students have made with adding and subtracting within 20, except for my student 6, just due to absenteeism. And all students were able to show 2 ways to solve word problems, and I was able to determine that during guided math groups. Difficulties for 3 out of my 7 students was counting backwards from a subtraction problem within 20, so we could continue to work that. If they had a number line, it was no big deal, but to count backwards, sometimes they would miss that 13 or 14 when counting higher numbers in the teen numbers. Expected challenges was time, since we only saw them 2 times in the school building, and then a little bit of time on our Wednesday Zooms. It was a huge barrier. If I would have had them 5 days a week in a class, there would have been more gains, but I was very pleased with what I saw so far. Next steps, if I had them a little bit longer, again, we'd be working on missing add-ins or counting backwards a little bit more too. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation and have a good night.